The Week 1 loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is officially behind us, and now we're looking onward and upward to our Sunday night football matchup against the Minnesota Vikings in Week 2. Welcome in, Falcons fans, to Falcons Today by Chat Sports. My name is Moose, and we're starting today's episode with some breaking news. The Falcons have signed kicker John Parker Romo to the practice squad, per source. This was coming after Raheem Morris's most recent comments about Younghoe Koo potentially not being the Falcons kicker anymore. They said they were going to bring in outside sources to help compete for that position battle. I should note, this does not mean that Koo has lost his job, but that rather Romo and Krieg are now going to be competing for the starting kicker position. So let's talk a little bit about this most recent Falcons addition. It's kind of hard to talk about kickers because they really only have one job. Isn't that right, producer Casey? And that job is make field goals. So let's talk about Mr. Romo here. He's a Georgia native, believe it or not. He has a combined 86.8 field goal percentage between his last year at his college in Virginia Tech, and now throughout the 2025 season, most recently with the Minnesota Vikings last season. He was on the 90-man roster for the New England Patriots. He ended up getting cut for Andy Borgalis and now signed by the Dirty Birds. I'm not going to pretend that John Parker Romo is a great kicker because I don't think he is. But at this point, anything is better than what Koo is giving you because the countdown for Koo to be out of the building is on. In fact, I believe his leash is this short. They might give him, and I'm just guessing here, they might give him just one more game. And if he doesn't show anything, like if he doesn't show a perfection, if he doesn't show a perfect 2 for 2 or 3 for 3 day, you might see him out of the building. So now the Falcons have 3 kickers, 2 on the practice squad and 1 on the 53. Younghoe obviously is your K1, if you want to call it that. But Parker Romo and Lenny Krieg, honestly, right now, I'm thinking that I'd give that shot to Lenny Krieg. He's got a cannon for a leg. Romo is just a little bit more tenured, a little bit more experienced, and has actual game reps. Like I said, last year at the Vikings went 11 of 12. I should also note that earlier this afternoon, the San Francisco 49ers made a kicker move of their own. They waived Jake Moody, who was a third-round pick. So they're kind of acknowledging, yeah, we wasted a third-round pick on a kicker that kind of sucks. So Jake Moody could be an option as well, although he's kind of like Koo. He's very, very streaky. When he's hot, he's unbelievable. And when he's off, it looks awful. And speaking of awful, if you want to know just how bad the numbers look for Koo, he's 27 of his last 37 since the beginning of last year. That's below a 73% clip. That's 4th worst in the NFL. And by the way, the 3 guys below him, Moody was one of them. Dustin Hopkins, I believe, who was kicking for the Browns, he got released. And then there's one other kicker that I've never heard of before. It was kind of like a flash in the pan kick. You know, he had like a 55% field goal percentage. Either way, I'm digressing. What I'm telling you is it's been bad. Really, really bad. So I think he gets one more game. And that might be generous. If you see this week throughout practice that Koo is getting constantly beat by the likes of Romo or Krieg, you could see Krieg get the nod and called up to the 53, especially if Koo is cut or waived. That'll be the biggest telling sign. So we're going to wait, obviously, for later on in the week to see if any roster moves happen like that. And, of course, we'll keep you updated. But if you had to pick one to go into Week 2 against the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday Night Football, who would it be? If it's Koo, type K. If it's Romo, type R. And if it's Krieg, type L for Lenny. I'm going to type my L for Lenny. That's who I'm riding with right now. We've given Koo chance after chance after chance. At some point, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting a different result. You can't be expecting a different result every time you put Koo onto the field. It's just not going to work. All right, coming up, some Falcons injury update that I believe is a very positive sign for the Dirty Birds, according to ESPN. In fact, it wasn't even released. It was just something that I noticed. Now, before I get to that, let me tell you about today's presenting sponsor, and that, of course, is our friends over at Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every single day, but on Prize Picks, you can get paid to be right. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on Prize Picks, where it is good to be right. It's super simple to play. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you could cash in. Want to know what it looks like? Boom. Right there. Here's mine for week 2. I got Lamar Jackson more on the rushing yards, Justin Fields more on the rushing yards. I've got Travis Kelce on my easy pick of the week with more than half a yard receiving. And then Bijan Robinson, I will actually take the less. Although I do believe the Falcons can get over 100 yards total rushing, I don't know that Bijan will have more than 70. But your picks can look like mine. They can look different. That's the great thing about Prize Picks. You could join millions of users and sign up today. Just use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's going to be right. So let's talk now injury news. The Falcons dodged a bullet with Drake London, by the way, like big time. There was major concern after the game when he went out with that shoulder injury that there would be more damage to it, and all signs indicate that it's not going to be that bad. In fact, they came out and said he was day-to-day, so much so that he's been left off the Atlanta Falcons injury report according to ESPN. That's great news because you still see Darnell Mooney on there. You still see Jack Nelson, DeMarco Hellams, and Tyrone Wheatley Jr. Here's why I say this is great news. Not only do we know that Drake London is your wide receiver 1, obviously he is, and duh, but the Falcons are going to need all of their weapons to take on this Vikings defense, which is led by Brian Flores. I don't know if you saw what Brian Flores did last night to the Chicago Bears, but he is kind of the sole reason that the Vikings were able to stay in the game and pull off the victory. We'll touch on this in just a little bit. But before we do that, let's show some love to our man Drake London, governor. Here's what I want you to do. Type those 5s in the comments to show your support. If I see 5 people that type their 5s, I'm going to give 5 randos a shout out on the next show. So make sure you get your 5s in the comment section because the next show that we do, I'm giving 5 shout outs to 5 random users. So let's talk a little bit more about the Vikings because this was last night's pressure rate for the Vikings against the Bears. Yikes. So they clearly took advantage of a much weaker Chicago Bears offensive line, which, Dahlman obviously is on right now, and clearly he didn't do nearly enough to help the Chicago Bears, but you know what? More power to you. This is what Brian Flores is known for, putting pressure on opposing quarterbacks. He's like insanely good at it. In fact, he's also the highest blitzing defensive coordinator in the NFL. Last year led the league in blitz rate. It was almost at 40%. So think about that. Almost 40% of the time that the Vikings line up in whatever personnel they're lining up on defense, whether that be base or a nickel, they're blitzing. And they're damn good at it too. So you can expect more of the same on young quarterbacks. Caleb Williams being a second-year quarterback, Michael Penix being a second-year quarterback. I think the writing is kind of on the wall that Flores is going to do almost the exact same thing that he did to Caleb last night, this coming Sunday night against the Dirty Birds. And speaking of which, make sure you join us because we'll be going live. Prime time action. I have left the Buccaneers loss beside me. I've put it in the trash. I'm no longer concerned about it because now it's all about the matchup with the Vikings. I've got thoughts on how to beat the Vikings because I thought the Bears, even though they lost, showed kind of a blueprint on how to make J.J. McCarthy's life a living hell. And I think the Dirty Birds can come away with a W on Sunday. So if you want a full preview sometime this week, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up icon because I got you. I'll take care of it. I'll let you know exactly what the Birds need to do in order to beat those Skull Vikes. But of course, that's a different episode for a different day. Thank you so much, Dirty Bird fans, for joining me on today's episode. A reminder to subscribe to the channel if you have not. Like the video if you haven't already. And as always, rise up and be cool.